Good afternoon from Australia, and good morning and namaste to everyone joining us from India and other parts of the world. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Daru people, the traditional custodians of the land on which Western Sydney University stands. I pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. On behalf of the Australia-India Water Centre, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Water Talk webinar today. This webinar series provides a platform for researchers, practitioners, policymakers, students, and the other stakeholders to share their knowledge, exchange ideas, and explore new approaches to complex water challenges. A key purpose of this webinar series is to strengthen connections between Australia and India. At the same time, we want to bring in experiences, perspectives from the wider international water community. As we all know, water challenges of today's cannot be addressed through science and engineering alone. They also are shaped by water governance, laws, institutions, ecosystems, technologies, and most importantly, people. This is why a transdisciplinary approach is so important to AIWC. Today's two presentations reflect this breadth very well. Our first presentation will examine water resources development and management in India through constitutional provisions and the legal framework. This is an important topic because the way responsibilities, rights, and powers are defined through the laws and institutions has a major influence on how water is allocated, developed, and managed. Our second presentation, The Future of Water, Intelligent Ecosystems for a Changing World, will look towards emerging approaches that bring together artificial intelligence, real-time environmental sensing, citizen science, and nature-based infrastructures like wetlands. It will explore how these tools can support freshwater management, ecosystem health, community engagement, and climate resilience. We are very fortunate to have two experienced speakers with us today. Dr. Archana Sarkar, formerly from National Institute of Hydrology in India, and Professor Ricky Spencer from Western Sydney University. Together, they bring complementary expertise in hydrology, water governance, ecology, technology, and community-based environmental management. I warmly thank both speakers for giving their time and sharing their knowledge with the AIWC community. I also thank everyone joining us today, including colleagues from our partner institutions and wider professional networks. Your participation is what makes this webinar series meaningful. Now my colleague, Associate Professor Dharma Hagre, will introduce the speakers and guide us through the presentations, followed by question and answer session. Dharma, over to you.
Thanks very much, Vasant, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Great to see all of you. Before we start the presentation, there are some house rules. Please ensure your microphone is muted out of respect to the presenters. We have two great presentations by two distinguished water professionals. Each presentation is about 20 minutes. We will have a Q&A session at the end of two presentations. Please type in your questions either using Q&A or chat options. Please do this whenever you get a question in your mind. We'll try to answer all the questions submitted in Q&A and chat at the end of the presentations. When it comes to your question, we may ask you to unmute your mic and explain your question. So now I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Archana Sarkar, Vice President, International Association of Hydrological Sciences, IAHS, to make a presentation. Before she starts her presentation, so here is a brief bio of Dr. Sarkar. Dr. Archana Sarkar is a distinguished scientist with over 27 years of professional experience in hydrology, climate change impact assessment, and water resources management at the National Institute of Hydrology in India, including a short-term experience at the Imperial College London, United Kingdom. She holds a PhD in water resources development and management from IIT Roorkee, a master's degree in computer-aided design in civil engineering from University of Roorkee, a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from MNIT Jaipur, and recently obtained a PG diploma in water laws, policy and governance from the prestigious Indian National Law University, Aurangabad. Our expertise spans hydrological modeling, Himalayan climate risk analysis, water policy integration, and stakeholder-centered climate adaptation strategies. Dr. Sarkar has produced new scientific information about the Ganges and Brahmaputra river basins through our research. She has led major national and international projects, authored more than 100 publications, delivered over 150 presentations, and organized numerous scientific training programs. Dr. Sarkar serves as the Vice President of International Association of Hydrological Sciences, IAHS, for the period 2023-2027. She also leads IAHS Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, promoting global inclusivity and equitable representation within the hydrological community. Now, Dr. Sarkar will speak on water resources development and management in India, constitutional provisions, and legal framework. Over to you, Dr. Sarkar.
Thank you very much, Professor Dharma. So I'll just share my screen. Let me see. So I think it is visible. I need to go in the presentation mode.
It's coming up, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go into the presentation mode.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Sorry. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And I hope I have about 25 to 30 minutes.
About 20 minutes, but see how you go.
20 minutes is actually less. I was told by Adrina that I can take up to 25. So I was, taking extra 5 minutes because the topic itself is, it's a very different topic. And
sure.
I'll go very fast. As you can say, I will be speaking on constitutional provisions and the legal framework for water resources development and management in India. And at the outset, as Professor Basant Maheshwari, he mentioned about the transboundary, aspects. The necessity of, transdisciplinary, not transboundary. I have almost 27 years of research experience at the National Institute of Hydrology, where we did some basic research, applied research, and advisory roles. But then in the last 1 year, when I obtained this PG diploma in water laws, policy and governance, and I was associated with the National Law University, so I got a completely different picture of water resources, and I was thinking, I mean, what I have done for 27 years, people like us also need to, work together with these policymakers. Otherwise, whatever, advanced research we are bringing out, it is not getting implemented. So I'll just, and it was very frustrating to learn all that. And some of those things I will be presenting before you today in the context of India. So, I need not mention the importance of water. For every region, it is important. But there are some, specific aspects to India. One is the economic lifeline, because India is agricultural. Indian economy is mostly the agricultural, based on agriculture, and water scarcity directly impacts the food security, livelihoods, and the economic growth. So it is very crucial. Then the social, the water, it is very, it's a vital component in the India's social fabric. It connects communities. So various communities, they get connected through water, although it's true for other regions also, but it is very specific for India when it comes to water. And environmental, of course, it is very important. The environmental sustainability, water is very important. It's not just for India, for all the regions of the globe. Now, just a quick recap of the water resources status in India. So we have the highest population at 18% of the world's population, but the available freshwater resources are only 4%. So this figure itself, speaks the story of the issues of water resources management. The total annual precipitation is about 4,000 cubic kilometers, annual figure it is, out of which the monsoon precipitation is 3,000, which is almost 75%. So this itself is a very, very big challenge. And almost 50% goes to evaporation and soil water. So finally, what gets converted to surface water is only 689 cubic kilometers. The replenishable groundwater is only 432 kilometers. The storage that has been created in terms of utilizable water is only 253 square kilometers. And still we have scope of water resources development within our country in some river basins, which I will show. So this is the major challenge of water resources management in India, the spatial and temporal variation. So almost 75% is coming in 4 months. And then in terms of space, in the western part, it is less than 200 millimeters annually to more than 2,500 meters annually in this particular region, the eastern part of the country. So this itself is a very big challenge. Now, looking at the water availability scenario in India. So, initially in the ancient times, or maybe pre-independence, when the population was less, India was a water surplus country. But as the population is rising, we have already crossed the water stress line, which is here. I'll just go to the pointer. Yeah. So we have already crossed, in 2025, we have already crossed the water stress line, which is less than 1,700 cubic meters per capita per year, and very fast approaching towards the water scarcity line. However, this is the average of all the water resources from all the river basins. If you look at the different rivers, in some of the river basins, we are already under the water scarcity line. And these are some of the future projections. So, like by 2050, as the population goes high, we are at 1140, which is almost close to the water scarcity line. Now, these are the major river basins. You can see the major river basins. India is crisscrossed by 12 major river systems. Now, why this figure is important? Because if you look at Ganges, it is crossing so many states. It's flowing from here and crossing all these states. Similarly, the Indus, the Brahmaputra, and even the southern rivers. So all the major river basins in India, they are interstate river basins. They pass through more than one state. Now, this is also a very interesting pie chart, which shows the water resources potential of different river basins. So it is highest in the Brahmaputra basin, followed by the Ganges. But in the next slide, if you see the water availability in the basins, so in Brahmaputra, it is still very high, but if you look at Ganges, it is below the water scarcity line already. So this is the situation, and it's a very big challenge for management of such kind of water resources. Now, the most alarming aspect of water resources in India is the groundwater. So you can see from pre-1970 how it has gone to post-1970, and it is said that the tube well density follows the population density in India. 10% of India's GDP, 70% of its irrigated area, 70 to 80% of its rural population, and 60 to 70% of its farm output and income, everything is related to the groundwater. And if you look at the agriculture or the irrigation aspect, it has increased and it is increasing. The irrigation from groundwater is increasing. And the irrigation from tanks and the canals, it is reducing. Although in last 1 decade, I would say, less than 1 decade, the government has made many interventions for replenishment of the groundwater, but the effect is very, very minute. Then another issue is with the water pollution. There are geogenic causes. The highest is the fluoride, salinity, arsenic, and iron. This is there. It's a very big challenge for water resources management. And there are point sources, non-point sources. It's common everywhere. And many of the rivers, they have, stretches, even the Ganges, even the Yamuna in Delhi. There are stretches of rivers where the water is not even fit for bathing. So finally, this is just a small summary of the issues related to water resources in India. I have explained most of them, but needless to mention that there is low awareness about overall scarcity and economic value of water within the country. The fragmented approach by different levels of government is there, and as such, the legal framework, it is an inadequate legal framework, and how that I will show you. So this is just a small flow chart which shows the institutional water framework in India, and I'm sure it is the same way might be followed in other countries also. So you have the water administration composed of the union ministry, the parliament, and the state legislation, the state governments. We have different states. So this is the water administration, which enacts the water laws, and based on the water laws, we get the water policy. So this is the legal structure. But then the legal structure, through the legal structure, the growth and the environment, they both get affected. So there has to be a balance between the growth and the environmental sustainability. Population is central to everything. And another major, actor here in the legal structure is the political structure in the country. So this is a very interesting slide which shows the evolution of water laws in India, how the water laws have evolved. So we can start right from the ancient era of Indus Valley civilization, which dates back to 2500 BCE. So the remains, now still you see these in the Sindh province, which now falls in Pakistan. You can see the remains of this. The background photograph is of the Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro from the Harappan civilization, and this is supposedly the biggest or the greatest public water tank in the history of civilization itself, not just the Indian civilization, but the history of civilization itself. Then the laws of Manu, they are inscripted, and they are also known as the Hindu laws, Hindu water laws. So they were based on some of the customs and other things from 200 to 100 BCE. And then another document is the Earth Shastra from the Kautilian period of 350 BCE to 150 BCE. So Arthashastra is the major document, which is a political document, and it also has a chapter for the how the water should be used. Then there was a medieval period of the Mughal period. However, in this period, there was a lack of attention towards the water regulation, and all the previous laws were followed, mainly the customary laws, the Hindu water laws. And then came the colonial era when the Britishers ruled the country. The major, water laws came, and they were mainly focused on the irrigation. Then the post-independence era, the Constitution of India was, developed. The came in 1950, and with the Constitution, then there were acts for water laws, water governance. The first act was the River Board Act, then the Interstate Water Dispute Act. Then there was an environmental era, wherein we got the legal acts or legal legislatures which were concerned with the pollution of water, the sustainability of environment. And in this period, the national water policies also came in India. And I would say that emerging era is the present and the future era, where the focus is on the integrated water resources management, the climate resilience. And for this, the National Water Framework Bill, it is in formulation at present. So I will go through some of these laws very briefly. So the Article 246 of the Constitution of India deals with the subject matter of laws to be made by Parliament and by legislatures of the state. So Parliament means the union government, the central government, and there are state governments. So there are three lists. The list one contains the subject matters for which the laws will be enacted by the union government. It is also known as the union list. I can give you the examples like the national security, the nuclear program. All these subjects are the subject matter of the center. Then we have a state list. So there are subjects. So water falls in the state list. The subject of water falls in the state list, which means state has a control of water. And then there is a concurrent list where both center and state can, formulate legislation. The example is like education, healthcare, etc. So the provisions related to water, so it is a state subject. Now, the list one, there is an entry number 56 in the union list, which says that the center can govern the development of interstate rivers and frames overarching national guidelines. However, water is a state subject in India as per the list 2 entry 17, and states have the power for development of water resources within the states for the rivers, falling in the states. And there are provisions for interstate matters also. There are different articles because the major 12 river basins in India, rivers in India, are the interstate rivers. So we have Article 263 of Constitution of India, which provides coordination between the states and therefore establishment of interstate councils. And Article 262, where the center can intervene in case there is an interstate water dispute. So center will have a overarching power over the state governments. Article 262, as I said, the Parliament will constitute a tribunal if there is a interstate water dispute. And there is a clause within this article that the Supreme Court or any other court cannot have jurisdiction over these kind of matters. Now, there are different, a number of constitutional provisions which are related to water. So, fundamental right to life. So, right to life straight away says that we have every citizen has a right to clean and safe drinking water. Then, right to equality before the law and directive principles of the state policy. So, they all are related to the water. Then there are fundamental duties of the citizens. They are related to water. Then there is a 11th schedule in one of the articles. So it gives powers to the panchayats. Panchayats are the sub-state legislations. And then we have municipalities. They are also sub-state. So they also have some legislative powers related to water management, development and management. Now the Again, there are some contradictions. The center can have control over state legislations, and there are different articles. Article 252, 253, 356. So, these kind of articles, I will not go into the details, but they are very contradicting. On one side, water has been made as a state subject, but on the other side, there are certain articles, provisions where the center can intervene. So coming to the existing legal legislations, that is the legal framework, what are the legal legislations related to water? These are the existing, already existing means they have been enacted. They are the legislations: the Indian Easement Act, the Interstate Water Dispute Act, the River Board Act, the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act, the Environmental Protection Act, and the Dam Safety Act. So this is the latest in 2021, and starting from 1882, which is from the colonial period. And now there are some legal initiatives which are in process by the Ministry of Jal Shakti, that is the Department of Water Resources, or you could say the Union Ministry of Water Resources. Some amendments to the Interstate Water Dispute Act, then National Water Framework Bill, River Basin Management Bill, Model Groundwater Bill, Draft National River Ganga Bill, Model Bill for Floodplain Zoning, and Draft River Regulation Zone Bill. So I will very briefly touch upon these bills. I think I've already taken 15 minutes, so I'll go very fast now from this point on. So, starting with the existing central legislations, the Indian Easement Act. The purpose of the Indian Easement Act is to provide private rights. So, in very, simple words, Indian Easement Act, it attaches the groundwater to the land. So, if a person owns a piece of land, that person also owns the groundwater below that particular land. So you have a private right. So you have a private right on the groundwater. Also some riparian rights, that a person who has been using the surface water within their land. So whether it is coming from somewhere else, but if they were using the water on their particular land, they can keep it using and nobody can stop. So there are certain limitations. It's age-old rule. There is no sustainability concept, no groundwater regulation, and it is highly unsuitable for modern times, especially now when the groundwater has been exploited like anything. The groundwater extraction at present is at 60%, almost more than 60% in India. Then the Interstate Water Dispute Act, because, there are interstate water conflicts. Why? Because historical agreements and legacy issues are there, the uneven distribution of water resources, competing demands among various sectors within a particular river basin. Then there are political and regional rivalries. Climate change is posing an issue, environmental stress is there, and there are legal institutional gaps. So by virtue of the authority given by the Article 262, which I mentioned earlier, the Parliament enacted the Interstate Water Dispute Act in the year 1956 for adjudication of the interstate water disputes. In this, the main beauty of this act is that the Supreme Court or any other court is barred from jurisdiction in such cases. However, there are some contradictions to that, which I will come later. So if a state government complains to the government of India about a water dispute with other states, the government of India can constitute a water dispute tribunal. So within 1 year, they have to do it. The tribunal will have a chairman and 2 members nominated by the Chief Justice of India. The government of India can also, appoint 2 persons as assessors. So these assessors are the water experts. So they can come from academic institutes, they can come from research institutes, they can come from water practicing organizations. The tribunals will have the same powers as a civil court, and it has to give its decision in 2 years, which can be extended to 2 more years. And then the government or states, they can seek guidance or explanation from the tribunal within 3 months of its decision. And if they seek any guidance, then again, tribunal can take 1 year. So it's a long process. However, in Indian context, this time frame is still, shorter compared to the civil appeals in various courts in India. So the process is like the decision of the tribunal to be published in official gazette. The published decision will have same force as the order of a Supreme Court. The government of India may frame schemes and establish an authority, so a river board authority or the river basin authority, and the scheme will not be affected by any other law. So you can see in this particular diagram, all these river basins, they already have tribunals. So these are some of the tribunals. The Kaveri is the oldest. The tribunal was formed in 1990. However, the Kaveri dispute is almost a century old because it has, background from the colonial era. So we have almost all the major river basins. Tribunals have been formed. The latest is the Mahanadi, the tribunal was formed in 2018. Now, there are some amendments have been made to this act to speed up the process. And as I said earlier, there are some contradictions. So, this is another big challenge for the water resources management in India, because there are contradictions. The Supreme Court, although it is barred from jurisdiction of these kind of disputes, but there are certain articles 131, 136, wherein the Supreme Court can, intervene through special leave petitions. So I will not go into the details of these articles because they will not make much sense if I read the legal language. But then, I'll just give an example that the Kaveri Water Dispute Tribunal, the award notification came in 2013. 2007, it was finally awarded, and 2013 it came. But then the Supreme Court, it considered the SLP and converted into civil appeal, and finally the award was modified in 2018. So you can see this is the award which was in 2007. This was the share of the 4 states, and it was modified after the Supreme Court's intervention. So still Supreme Court is intervening, and this is a problem because this is how the tribunal awards are never settled. Now, the River Board Act, which came in 1956, it is an act to provide for the establishment of river boards for regulation and development of interstate rivers and river valleys, but no river board was established. It is only advisory in nature, and it did not work at all. Some river boards were, constituted, but then for very specific purpose, like the Betwa River Board, only for efficient, economical, and early execution of Rajghat Dam project. That's it, not considering the entire river basin. So these are some of the river boards, almost defunct kind of act. Then the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act in 1974 and the Environmental Protection Act in later. So the Water Act of 1974, it was enacted as per the Article 252 of the Constitution for prevention of pollution of water due to discharge of liquid effluents from industries. And based on this act, the central and state pollution control boards were, constituted, and now there are guidelines for all the industries for discharge of effluents, the quality of discharge of effluents in water bodies. Then the Environmental Protection Act, it came in 1986, and this act was passed in the wake of the famous Bhopal gas tragedy, to implement Stockholm Declaration of UN Conference on Human Environment, to which India is a signatory. So because of this act, the central government constituted an authority known as the Water Quality Assessment Authority and the Central Groundwater Authority. So now they have, specific norms of controlling the water quality of the groundwater and other water bodies. And the latest is the Dam Safety Act, which came in 2021. This is a milestone in water resources management in India. So the draft for dam safety was prepared by the Ministry of Jal Shakti, and it enjoins responsibility of central government, state government, and owners of specified dams to set up an institutional mechanism for ensuring safety of such dams. So the dams considered in Dam Safety Act are the large dams which have height between 10 to 15 meters and also above 15 meters. So all those dams, they come under the purview of the Dam Safety Act. And it defines the duties and functions of various institutions in relation to surveillance, inspections, then maintenance, also instrumentation, hydrological and seismological stations, and also addresses the emergency action plan and disaster management. So this was this finally, the president gave the assent to the Dam Safety Act on 13th December 2021. And based on the Dam Safety Act, now we have the National Committee on Dam Safety as well as the National Dam Safety Authority. So now these authorities and committees are there at the state, at the central level as well as at the state level. And this itself, I will not go into the details, but then this itself, it requires one special lecture if I go for the details. Now, these the previous ones were the legislative frameworks which are already existing, but then we also have some initiatives taken by the Ministry of Water Resources, which are still under process. So one is the amendment to the Interstate Water Dispute Act, because this particular act, it is taking a long time. So amendment has to be made. Then we have a National Water Framework Bill, the River Basin Management Bill, the Model Groundwater Bill, the Draft National River Ganga Bill, the Model Bill for Floodplain Zoning, and Draft River Regulation Zone Bill. And the ministry has also planned the amalgamation of all these bills into the Draft Model State Bill on Integrated Water Resources Development and Management. So the amendment to the Interstate Water Dispute Act, it proposes a single permanent tribunal to adjudicate all interstate river water disputes, which will have benches for a particular case, and the bench will cease once the dispute is settled. So here the time for decision is reduced from 3+2 to 2+1. Further report time is restricted to a maximum of 1.5 years. Then there is provision of the Dispute Resolution Committee, and there would be no requirement for publication of the report in the official gazette. However, this act, it could not be considered, there are Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So it got passed. These are the two houses of the parliament in India. So it got approved through one house, but not the other house. So this is still pending. The National Water Framework Bill, it is mostly based on the National Water Policy, and which is based on the Integrated Water Resources Management. This bill aims towards legislative reforms for sustainable management of water resources, and it also focuses on a central law, because the river basins, we have these major river basins, so there has to be a central law. Then the National Water Framework Bill, it was, some of the governments supported the bill, but many of the governments are not in favor of the bill, and some of the governments are still examining the bill. So this is still under process. Then the Model Groundwater Bill. The first bill came into 1970. Then it was continuously revised, and the Draft Model Bill 2016 is in public domain. Now, as per the Indian Easement Act, as I said, groundwater, rights are attached to the land rights. But through this groundwater model bill, now the government has identified areas that which are the, in terms of groundwater, which are the vulnerable areas, which are the, red flag areas from where groundwater cannot be extracted at all. So these kind of divisions are made, and then there are guidelines that water cannot be extracted, even if, the landowner has a private right, it cannot be extracted. All the groundwater wells in India are getting registered through this water bill. So these are the states where it has already been enacted. The National River Ganga bill is for the provision for strengthening of institutional mechanism, zonal plans, etc. It is mainly focused on the Ganges River, and I would like to mention that the Ganges River, it has one of the highest water resources potential, but the water availability is very low because the major population of the country resides in the Ganges River basin. Then there is a model draft bill for floodplain zoning 2021. So has been recognized as an effective non-structural measure for flood management. So, I mean, it is very surprising that we still do not have a legislation on floodplain zoning in our country. The states of Manipur, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, and J&K had enacted the legislation. Only these 5 states. The rest states have not enacted. But in these states also, the delineation and demarcation of floodplains is yet to be undertaken. Then another bill, the Draft River Regulation Zone Bill. So this particular bill, it was, triggered by the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change after the floods of Uttarakhand in 2013 and Kashmir and Pune in 2014. So the RRZ, it is called, it intends to regulate developmental and industrial activities up to 5 kilometers from the banks of river stretches having floodplains and an equivalent area of mountain hill stretches under the 3. So there are 3 river conservation zones, and demarcation has to be done with reference to the highest flood level with a 100-year return period. So these are the 3 zones: the prohibited activity zone, restricted activity zone, and the regulated activity zone. So this is very much similar to the floodplaining zoning bill. And then the River Basin Management Bill, because the River Board Act is totally ineffective till now. So this River Basin Management Bill has been proposed, where the basin would be considered as one entity. A legal foundation for river basin development and management plan for inter-river basins is needed, which will provide the institutional legal frameworks. So these are the 13, river basins which are to be considered in this river basin management bill. However, no state, some of the states have outrightly rejected this bill. Some of the states have given comments as no comment, and some of the states, they have given no communication to the center on this particular bill. So, development of model state bill on integrated water resources development and management. So, the ministry plans amalgamation of these 6 draft bills which are under consideration. So, it is to be sent. So, this is a very new development. It is to be sent to other central ministries. There are many central ministries which, indirectly have, water as their subject. Now, just one slide on the policy framework. So the first policy came in 1987. So from the engineering kind of approach, the policy is now focused to the integrated water resources management approach. And similarly, the state, all the different states, they have their own state water policies. The main, principle of the state water policy is the national water policy, but they have their own state water policies. There are many institutions which do water governance, central and state legislation, National Water Resources Council, Water Resources Boards, central ministries, organizations. So you can see, the kind of institutions involved in. So in one, if you see it from one angle, it is good, but from the other angle, it is also not good because, the consensus is very difficult if so many institutions are involved. So, and these are the central ministries: the Department of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation. It is the principal agency responsible for water resources in India, but there are so many ministries: commerce, industry, power, forest, rural development, urban development, agriculture, drinking water, sanitation, earth science, Ministry of Science and Technology, Ministry of Shipping, Ministry of New and Renewable. So all are associated with water in one or the other way. There are different state level legislations looking into the issues of water. And this is one thing, this is my last slide, in fact. So the latest is the water resources regulatory authorities at the state level. So some of the states have come up with water resources regulatory authority, and one of the best examples is the Maharashtra Water Resources Regulatory Authority, MWRRA. It is in place. It is working very well. They have, a full, they have a full code how the water resources will be used. They are taking tariffs. The tariffs are not just, recovering the O&M cost. They are also making profits. And the best part of this is, they also have the aspect of water trading, what is already in practice in Australia, Now it is there in the Maharashtra Water Resources Regulatory Authority. They are, addressing the water trading here. So these are my concluding remarks. So I will not read everything, but then what I would like to mention here is that the water laws, they still remain patchy because water is a state subject, also of concern at the union level, and partly because elements of water law are in environment and health also. So sometimes various legislations, there are legislations from the health ministry, there are legislations from the water resources ministry. So these legislations are sometimes, contradictory. The water policy, it has been pushed in a number of different directions, reflecting the specifics of the Indian situation, such as its complex administrative structure, overlapping and sometimes contradictory rights, vastly different endowments in water resources in different regions, and difficulties in allocating water in most socially and economically manner. Despite this comprehensive framework, effective implementation depends on coordination among institutions. And I have made this particular sentence in blue color because this is the most important thing, the politico administrative coordination. Still, this is a major, I would say, this hampers the water legislation as well as the water policy formulation.